dive in and learn a little bit more about Mattel. You got the 2 days here, but why don't you share with the audience who you are, what you're doing? I'm sure everyone knows, but who Mattel is.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, so Mattel's the world's largest toy company. I think everybody knows that, but what people may not know is this on? Can you guys hear it? How about now?
Here, why don't you take mine?
Does this work now? Well, I think we need everybody here. Oh, the other mic. Pass it back, how's that? So Mattel's the world's largest toy company. I think everybody knows that. Everybody probably knows our big power brands, Barbie, Hot Wheels, Fisher Price. What people may not know is that we kind of think of ourselves from going to just being a toy manufacturer to managing franchises and managing IP. And so that's a big transformation that the company's going through. And what I do is I lead global media, which I lead the media team. I work with agencies, our folks from Spark is here, some of the folks from our media team are here. And so everything's paid, essentially.
Great. And my name is David Wynn. I'm a salesperson at LG Ad Solutions. So I'm excited to talk about unlocking the potential of OTT. But before we jump in, I have to ask, what are you watching?
Well, so if you asked a couple weeks ago, I would be really excited to talk about Succession and Yellow Jackets. But now that that's over, I had to find something new. And I just started watching The Diplomat. But I think the other thing that's interesting, kind of also funny considering what I do for a living, is that I'm a cord cutter. I've been a cord cutter for a really long time. I've been an ad avoider for a long time too. I did some of this with TiVo. I had the original TiVo that I hacked and installed an extra hard drive so that I could store more content on it.
Yeah, I think I've been a cord cutter since the early 2010s. Just to take a poll here, how many people actually still have linear? Just raise your hand.
That's a good amount.
That's a fair amount, but I would probably say maybe a quarter. To share what I'm currently streaming because Succession is over, so I'm sure everyone's looking for something to watch. I'm watching Jury Duty on Freevee. But based off of that poll, right, we only saw about a quarter of people that still have linear. I think as we look at upfronts and planning as it's coming along, eMarketer is forecasting that over 3/4 of TV budgets will still be on linear. So, I think we all know, based off the Nielsen data too, that more time is spent streaming than it is on linear. So, how does Mattel approach OTT in your overall TV strategy?
Yeah, I mean, for us, OTT and digital video is just TV for us, right? So, we've seen this for quite some time. Kid television ratings are down over 90% since 2006. So, we've been actively looking at how we deal with that change, and it's truly a transformation. Mattel was exclusively a kids television advertiser a while ago, and so now we are predominantly digital. And so, we really see the disruption of linear TV as an opportunity, right? How are we smarter? How do we do things better and reach kids and get kids engaged with content?
And so how are you approaching the engagement which will help the kids and getting that content in front of them?
Yeah, so a big part of our mix is YouTube. And so, YouTube is CTV. And so, how we kind of approach YouTube is we have advertising, but we also have a lot of content on YouTube. And our content is brand content. We have always on brand content, and we have huge channels for our brands. And we spend a lot of time thinking about how we can optimize our content, how we build our audience over time. And we spend media dollars driving to that content, and we look at how our audience is engaging with that content. And when we see content that is getting engaged with, we know that's our consumers. And we know that if consumers are engaging with that content, then we're reaching the right people. And we spend a lot of time really looking at our advertising, how it's getting engaged with, and optimizing what we're spending money against. And also we use that to inform how we create content. And the content that gets the most engagement is the content that we double down on, and we create more of the content that's getting engaged with.
Yeah, I think earlier you mentioned, you guys are looking at franchises, and so I think, that the content creation that you're making makes total sense because you're really bringing these products alive, right? You're creating these backstories with them. While we all love Google and YouTube, right, it is a walled garden, so it does have its limitations, but also I think it's great for reach. As you kind of look at your media strategy to drive that engagement within that YouTube content that you're creating, how do you kind of look at those kind of maybe outside of that in terms of your paid media efforts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we create content for other platforms as well. So for some of our brands, Netflix is actually the #1 place that for our content. And I think there's been a lot of talk of FAST. FAST is a big part of our strategy and what we're thinking about. There's a lot of opportunities for us to have our content on other platforms, and it's also a big opportunity for us for our advertising. So there's a plethora of places that we advertise with. We work closely with lots of partners and look beyond YouTube to drive engagement with content and also for our advertising.
Yeah, I think you had touched on FAST, and that's one of the fastest growing categories within the OTT space based off of this recent Magnite report. So I think when we look at OTT too, there's so many different ways kind of to buy and activate. We got all these acronyms now from AVOD, TVOD, SVOD, there's freemium now. So kind of as you look at other platforms, how do you evaluate that, and how do you prioritize one over the other?
Not really, right? For us, everything is TV and everything is digital video. So, what's most important for us is, where we can get an audience and where we can get engagement. I would say, a big challenge for us that I know we're going to spend a lot of time talking about is measurement, right? And so how do we measure, how do we get an idea of where the audience is? We have a lot of data, that we look at, and I think one of our big challenges as an industry is, how we determine where the audience is ahead of time, so that we can take past behavior and predict what future behavior.
Yeah, I think measurement is a whole world itself, and I actually want to drill down into two pieces of your response there. So you follow the eyeballs, and you're the global VP of media. So how do you look at the U.S. versus the rest of the world, and maybe what differences there are?
Yeah. So we have some global deals that we look at. And the challenge with that is identifying where it makes sense for us and for the publisher. I would say a lot of the trends that we see in the U.S. Have not quite hit the rest of the world. We're starting to see it, and we know that it's coming to the rest of the world. So we work with all of our markets to identify what the best mix is, and in a lot of places, the TV ratings decline hasn't really hit yet, but we know it's coming.
Got it. And then to go into the second piece with measurement, right? I think that has been a challenge, I think, especially for consumer brands, as most, like your products are within retailers. What kind of challenges and limitations are you seeing, and then how does Mattel kind of work around that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the biggest challenge that we have from a measurement perspective is the lack of a currency. And so I think what we really need to solve as an industry is having currency cross-platform for digital video. And I think that, there are two examples, I think, historical examples that kind of show, how currency can really benefit the industry. I think one is that, when the cable networks were rated by Nielsen, but the ratings weren't released yet, the cable networks didn't want to release the ratings. They were very afraid that the really tiny audiences that they had on Nielsen would turn away advertisers. And it turned out that the opposite was true, that the ratings were released that led to the explosive growth of the cable industry, where now we're going through a new transition in the industry. So I think that's one recent example. I think the other example that hit the kids TV cable business very hard was when ratings really started to decline. Right? There was a lot of talk about the shortcomings of Nielsen, which are real, but there was a lot of talk about, well, the ratings may not be accurate, and I think in hindsight it was really kind of an advanced view of where we saw the shift to streaming, and so I think that currency kind of allowed us to really understand what was really happening, and I think that's kind of really the challenge that we face now, where we can't necessarily see across the entire ecosystem, across linear and digital video, where viewing is headed.
Yeah, no, I definitely hear you. When you talk about limitations, I have to talk about COPA, because I think being for children's products and toys, that has, I wouldn't say it may limit some of the opportunities or kind of these ideas that you want to do for marketing. So how do you kind of work around them, or work around that to make sure you're compliant using OTT to target your key audiences?
Right. Yeah. So COPA, first of all, we take COPA really seriously. Right. And I don't really see it as kind of something to work around, right? It's to me, it's very simple, right? We don't collect any data, we don't collect any targeted data, we don't collect any behavioral data on kids. And I think what's important is that we also work to make sure that all of that data is being stripped out. So I think a lot of challenges that have existed in the past with COPA is where there hasn't necessarily been transparency, where there are platforms that didn't necessarily weren't transparent about data they were collecting, or didn't necessarily understand that you have to make sure that there's no data that a platform is collecting that advertisers aren't aware of. So we're very diligent about making sure that the platforms that we're advertising on are COPA safe, COPA compliant, GDPR compliant outside of the US. And the way that we target is contextual alignment, right? We're dependent on making sure that we're running in the right content. As we've talked about with YouTube, one way to know that you're reaching your audience is that you're getting the engagement. So if you're getting that engagement, then you know that you're reaching your audience, and behavioral targeting and collecting audience data isn't really necessary. And I think it's also not really necessary if you do a really good job of aligning your content that you're running into your audience. And so I think where the challenge comes in is that right now that's very manual. And so we spend a lot of time very manually going through content lists, program lists, asking for program lists. A lot of times there are some partners who say, it's going to be thousands and thousands of pieces of content, and we say, yeah, of course we know that. That's okay. We need to know. And so a lot of times it's very manual, and we're dependent on our partners also to help us with that. So we work a lot with our partners to share the content list, and we try to contextually align based on older kids, younger kids, boys, girls, all kinds of kind of content alignment that we can make sure that we're reaching the right audience.
Yeah, I think I've heard this from many brands where transparency and kind of getting information does kind of restrict things. So looking at engagement and then making sure your potential environment makes sense. And so I want to kind of get your thoughts on engagement and why you're driving them into your content to track that engagement when it comes to your creative strategy, when it comes to OTT. I think there was a study released where 82% of people like enhanced ads, right? So whether that be here's your closest retailer to buy your Mattel products, or location, or things, QR codes. How do you look at OTT creative, and how does that differ from linear?
Yeah. So first of all, what I like to say is Mattel was exclusively 15-second television spots when we were television. We didn't create 15-second television spots because we decided that it was easier to tell a message in 15 seconds. It's really only like 11 seconds because we have to have the island at the end of a toy spot. Right, exactly. So, right, that's kind of the island at the end that says, batteries not included. It shows the product on its own. And so, we didn't wake up and say, you know what, like we really like to only tell a story in 11 seconds. It's not certainly easier. So, we did it because the cost of TV was increasing so much, and it really was, a better ROI if we were paying half the cost for the spot rather than double the cost for double the amount of time. So now that we're in this transition to the digital space, what's important is that we're creating the right content that's being engaged with. We're experimenting a lot with longer content. Making sure that content is getting the extra engagement, and then also creating content that is just really engaging, that is kind of breaking with the conventions of what a traditional toy spot is. Because a traditional toy spot kind of has a formula, and we need to try to experiment and create kind of new ways of communicating with our consumers, and kind of also broadening the audience we have. We kind of think now as our audience as kids, shoppers, and collectors or fans of our products and brands.
Yeah, I think when you talk about broadening your audience, I think, everyone knows the Barbie movie coming out, so that's hitting a whole different audience. And, it looks great. I can't wait to see that. So just to kind of recap before I ask my very last questions, I think the big challenges that we're looking to solve today when it comes to OTT is efficiency, because we talked about the shortening of the creative link. We're looking at universal measurement as well as transparency, especially when it comes to OTT. But to end on a positive note, if looking forward, what are you most excited about when it comes to OTT and integrating, doing more with that with your marketing?
Yeah, and I think, we spend a lot of time measuring, and really the best data that we have is our market mix model. And the market mix model right now tells us that the most important variables for OTT are views and impressions. And it also tells us that the single most important factor with driving efficacy is cost. That if we drive down the cost, it'll be more effective. And I don't think that that's a good long-term plan for our business, that if we're just driving down the cost and going for cheaper CPMs, then that's not going to benefit the buying and selling side. And I think the reason for that is because we don't have that currency, right? So we don't have a way to really understand that we're reaching real people, that we're reaching our audience, and that we're holding ourselves accountable to the buy and sell side, that we're delivering against that. So I think what I'm most encouraged by is we're going to figure it out, right? It's coming eventually. I think part of the reason why I'm here today is I think as an industry, we all need to push to make it happen faster. And I think the other thing that will also help will be technology, right? So I think from a programmatic standpoint, I think that we're too kind of focused on programmatic right now as kind of a way to make things more efficient. I think we need to focus on programmatic as how we can make things more effective. How can we use technology to make sure that we're running in the right content, that we can use technology to make things more effective and match our audiences with our content. And so we don't have the problem where we go to partners and say, hey, we see the list of programs and it's like, oh no, the list is too long and we can't target content. I think technology will enable that, and I think that what I'm most encouraged by is that we're going to solve all these problems because I think right now we're going through this incredible period of disruption, and this is going to be the way that we're going to solve it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, thank you so much for the time. I want to leave a minute to see if anyone had a question.
Hi, Kristen from Mattel. I wanted to ask about contextual alignment, but when it comes to different devices. So, for example, kids watching Barbie on TV, but mom's watching someone else's phone, and your brother's watching someone else's iPad. Do you have anything in mind that caters to everyone's sense? We know that there are multiple devices.
So we don't right now. I mean, what we do look at is, we can see kind of that CTV is doing very well, right? And CTV, like intuitively makes sense, right? If you're probably on CTV, you're more kind of focused on that content. I think the future, that I kind of just talked about will be that, we can kind of understand based on the contextual alignment, maybe who we're reaching. I think from my perspective, I think COPA makes sense from a regulatory perspective. So I don't think that it's ever going to change where we're going to want to use kind of targeting information and collecting personal information to kind of target our content. I think we'll do it more based on contextual alignment and more based on how that content is being engaged, and that we'll see that we're reaching real people because we're getting that engagement.
Thank you so much.